Police found signs of a struggle and blood stains on a 24-year-old girl when she disappeared from the store where she worked the night shift. However, the fact that the thief left the cash register intact suggested that it was not a theft. A few days later, the girl's body was discovered 5 kilometers from the store. It took more than 25 years to solve this terrible case. And only then did the fate of Lisa Siegert become known. Lisa Marie Siegert was born in Holyoke, Massachusetts on March 24, 1968. Her youth was spent in the city of Agawam with her family, where she grew up in a close-knit family with 3 other children. The girl had a passionate love for music all her life. At a young age she mastered several instruments, and eventually joined the school musical ensemble. After graduating from high school, Lisa attended Westfield State University, where she graduated with a teaching degree in 1990. As an intern, she worked several shifts as a camp counselor at a children's camp and also initially worked as a Sunday school teacher at a church before being hired as a teacher's aide at her former Agawam High School. When Lisa was 24 years old, she worked primarily with a group of children with special needs. She was an expert in her field, understood her students more deeply than any other teacher, and worked hard to give them the best education she could. She also worked part-time in the evenings with her sister Lynn at a local card and gift shop. Lisa began working at the store on April 15, 1992, the last day of her next school shift. She was required to work from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. on her shift. During this period, Lisa collaborated with her sister, but Lynn did not work there for long. Lisa's shift worker, Sophia Maynard, arrived at the store at 9 a.m. to start her shift. To her surprise, Lisa's car was parked in the parking lot, which was strange, because Lisa worked at school in the morning and should not have been in the store at that time. Sophia then noticed that the lights were on inside the store and the sign was turned to the side and open. The girl thought that Lisa might have left for the morning shift because of the approaching Easter holidays. Sophia got down to business and called Lisa by name, but received no answer. As she walked closer to the counter, she saw that Lisa's things were left there in plain sight. She realized that Lisa would not have left without the car keys and wallet, so Sophia decided to call the police. When the squad reached the store, they began looking around in hopes of finding some evidence of Lisa's presence. Before the officers entered the back room, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Lisa's blood was found on several boxes, and all evidence pointed to a fight that took place in the back room. Cards and boxes were scattered on the floor, and a mark was found on the door, indicating that someone had struck it with force with a heel. Apart from these discoveries, no other information could be found that could explain the girl's disappearance. It later turned out that Lisa did not come to school that morning, and the principal even contacted Lisa's mother to find out what happened. However, the girl's mother also did not know about her whereabouts. The town was promptly warned about Lisa's abduction, and within a few hours all her friends, relatives and acquaintances took part in the search for the missing girl. The first step of the police was to consider that this was a version of a robbery. But this version quickly disappeared, since not a single thing was missing, and Lisa's money and those that were in the cash register also remained untouched. To understand what happened that night, the police decided to create a chronology of events. They learned that Lisa's sister had left the store around 6 o'clock in the evening. Investigators also spoke with employees of nearby stores, and they still managed to find out something. It turned out that Lisa had been talking for about 15 minutes with a salesperson from a nearby carpet store. They were talking about an issue with the recently renovated local parking lot, which was problematic because customers from a nearby bowling alley often used the parking lot in front of their stores. They were clearly unbalanced. Both Lisa and the carpet salesman were unhappy about this, but were powerless to take action and agreed not to risk being reprimanded because they were visitors. After the conversation, they did not immediately return to work. It turned out that the cash register was last used in the evening at about 20 minutes past 9. When police finally tracked down the last customer, they discovered it was a woman who had entered the store at approximately 9 p.m. She claimed that the salesman did not approach her and that she heard some noise coming from the back room, but chose to leave without waiting. As a result, the police were able to establish that Lisa disappeared between approximately 2020 and 2100 hours. Investigators had to find out what happened during these 40 minutes. The FBI and state police have offered support to a local investigator. Collectively, they began an extensive search for Lisa, using dogs, helicopters and infantry to comb the area around the facility. Despite this, they were unable to find Lisa. April 19th. Every church in the area prayed for Lisa to be found alive and unharmed. However, this was not destined to happen. Easter was approaching, but the mystery surrounding the matter overshadowed the celebration. At approximately 2 p.m., police received a call from a man who was walking his dog near Highway 75. The man noticed the woman's body and immediately called authorities. When police arrived, they were able to identify Lisa Siegert's body and found multiple puncture wounds. The girl's body was discovered 5 kilometers from the store, and later doctors came to the conclusion that Lisa had been subjected to violence before her death. Previously, Lisa was taken there by a criminal. As a result, investigators acted quickly to isolate the location and preserve all potential evidence. On the day of Lisa's death, it was raining. This made it possible to observe tire tracks on the soft ground. Unfortunately, the police could not find any weapons or other material evidence. A rumor quickly spread throughout the city that Lisa had become the victim of an unidentified, evil killer. In the church where the girl taught Sunday school, a funeral service was held, which was attended by almost 1,000 people. Residents of a small town, accustomed to a quiet, safe life in the fields, were on the verge of panic. In a matter of days, self-defense sections were overcrowded, some store owners canceled solo evening shifts, and employees were forced to walk each other to their cars. A total of 300 women also applied for permits to own firearms. City residents were terrified that the killer would strike again, so the FBI worked non-stop on the case. They soon found traces of DNA at the crime scene that could belong to the killer. Initially, the police suggested that the killer could be Lisa's boyfriend, but he was quickly acquitted because he had a solid alibi and his DNA did not match the evidence found. The DNA of every friend, relative, and acquaintance of Lisa was analyzed, but no matches were found. Witnesses said they saw a suspicious car that evening. The car that the tire tracks found could have belonged to was identified by fictitious investigators. After speaking to every driver of a van or large SUV with similar tires, police found nothing suspicious and were unable to identify any potential murder suspects. Luckily, they were able to find an employee of a nearby store who said she saw the car. She claimed that she was driving home from her place of work near where Lisa worked when, at a traffic light, she saw a large SUV leave the road and head towards the area where Lisa's body was later discovered. Since it was too dark to describe the car in more detail, she could only say that she believed there were a man and a woman inside. She also mentioned a fact: the woman's head jerked strangely, as if she was sleeping or unconscious, when the car turned onto the gravel road. Unfortunately, this information did not lead to the emergence of new potential criminals. A year and a half passed before Lisa's family and friends got another chance to find out the truth. In October 1993, when national television aired an episode of this popular program that featured stories about unsolved cases, sometimes this led to other witnesses coming forward to the police, giving the case new life. Lisa's case was no different. Within an hour of the broadcast, the police received several hundred calls from people who had at least some knowledge. Typically, most of these calls are not leads at all, but the police pursued them nonetheless. Detectives said they each found several leads that were noteworthy, but they did not say which ones. Unfortunately, nothing came of these versions either. The likelihood of solving this case has steadily declined over the years. Lisa's family did everything possible to make the girl's life memorable. Although Lisa's teaching career ended so suddenly, her family made significant contributions to the education system. In 1995, the girl's parents established a fund to help gifted students, which distributed scholarships to students in the amount of about $35,000. Additionally, the girl's parents donated $11,000 to the science department of the school where Lisa worked, supporting the study of genetics and purchasing equipment. 10 years have passed since Lisa was killed. However, her mother never gave up the idea that the matter would one day be resolved and made every effort to preserve her daughter's legacy. She participated in every interview and answered all questions from journalists. Meanwhile, the police had only one piece of critical evidence: a DNA sample found at the crime scene, and they continued to compare this sample with all known criminal databases in the hope that the culprit would eventually show up. However, over the years this did not happen. Every year, the mother was able to gather hundreds of people to honor Lisa's memory. Investigators decided to use a new DNA phenotyping technique in September 2016, 24 years after Lisa was killed. The basic idea of this method was that DNA experts would analyze it and determine the criminal's appearance by creating a portrait of him. Currently, they can use DNA to determine the sex, age of the criminal, as well as approximate eye and hair color. Based on the DNA of the person accused of killing Lisa, scientists created 2 images of the suspect between the ages of 25 and 50. These data are not always accurate, but sometimes the match with the face of a real person is striking. When the police released this information, about 200 people called and reported that they had seen such a person. However, most of the leads did not come to fruition until September 18, 2017, when the police made a bold statement and the criminal was taken into custody. It turned out to be Gary Scarra, a 49-year-old man. The American media immediately began reporting this news, since authorities rarely discover a killer 25 years after a crime. News of Gary's arrest immediately attracted a lot of media attention. Investigators described how they found him. It so happened that this man was already on the list of suspects when the murder occurred in 1993. A Seattle lawyer was among hundreds of people who called police with possible evidence after a television show aired about unsolved crimes. He told the investigator that his client may have information about Lisa's murder. This client was divorcing her husband. They lived in the nearby town of Longmeadow. She claimed that her husband became more interested in information and Lee Siegert, and when the investigation of the case was shown on television, he burst into the room and stared at the screen, not paying attention to anyone around him. Gary Scarra was 24 at the time and his marriage was falling apart. He had a 1-year-old son, but constant quarrels with his wife forced the couple to begin divorce proceedings almost immediately after the birth of the child. Police said they had been looking into Gary's involvement in the case since 1993, however, they could find no evidence of this and did not give much weight to his wife's testimony since she had a long history of alcohol abuse in addition to a long list of mental illnesses. After the divorce, Gary received court custody of his child, but his wife secretly moved the boy to another state. It is also important to remember that this was not the first time that current or ex-wives called the police to report their husband's possible involvement in Lisa's death, since Gary's case was one of those. When the police interviewed Gary, they did not take this evidence into account properly. Gary denied his guilt and refused to take a DNA test. Since he was not legally obliged to do so, the police had no other choice. Gary was one of those brought in for further questioning by police after compiling a list of all the men questioned in the case who refused to provide DNA samples. In 2008, it became apparent that Gary was avoiding contact with anything, including the table and the offered water bottle. By 2017, investigators had identified 11 suspects, including Gary, because they were questioned but refused voluntary DNA testing. Although there were many more suspects in the case, DNA phenotyping helped narrow the list and eliminated any people who did not match the characteristics of the test results. In August 2017, investigators collected all the necessary data and appeared in court. The court granted their request for an order requiring all suspects on the list to provide DNA samples and other data. On September 13 of the same year, the police came to Gary's house to inform him of this need, but he was not there. The roommate opened the door for them, and the departing detectives handed him a business card and asked him to immediately convey information to Gary. The next day, an unexpected event occurred. Gary's current girlfriend came to the police station and reported that he left her 3 notes and disappeared. The notes included a 2-page confession to Lisa's murder, as well as an apology to Siegert's family, which shocked detectives. Gary wrote that since childhood he had a strong, uncontrollable desire for violence. That evening he was overcome with thoughts of kidnapping and torturing someone, and he allowed himself to commit a heinous act. The man added that although he had no intention of killing the girl, the situation apparently got out of control. In the note, he also explained that he was too scared to surrender to the police, although he wanted to do this hundreds of times. He wrote that he had long suffered from self-hatred and that at the end of the letter he intended to commit suicide. Just as officers began searching for Gary, his car was discovered in the parking lot of Stafford Hospital. It later turned out that the man had taken hard drugs, but quickly got into the car and drove to a nearby hospital to get an injection. After the doctors provided him with the necessary assistance, the police immediately detained him. Meanwhile, the court ordered a search of Gary's house. There, police found other objects bearing his DNA. The result of the analysis was not a surprise since it was completely consistent with the killer's pattern. At the same time, the investigator discovered other significant evidence. Gary once told his wife in plain text that he could not have sex with her unless he had a knife in his hand. Gary's wife, who reported suspicions about him and his address back in 1993, died in 2014. However, the investigator managed to obtain documents prepared by his lawyer, which contained many eerie details. The day after Lisa was killed, Gary's wife called her sister and said that he came home very late, was extremely tense, and had scratches all over his body. He also gave his wife a music box, claiming that he bought it from an elderly, gray-haired woman in the store where Lisa worked. The problem was that such a person had never worked in the store, and it was unclear why all these facts were not reported to the police. While in custody, Gary suddenly protested his innocence and did not admit to his actions. It is likely that this was due to simple fear. However, he had no chance of escaping punishment given the evidence obtained. The only thing he managed to achieve was a reprieve. The trial was to begin in just 2 years. However, Gary, who had been under arrest the whole time, made a sudden decision to confess. The defendant pleaded guilty to the murder of Lisa Siegert on September 21, 2019 before a judge. He was charged with first-degree murder and faces life in prison without possibility of release in Massachusetts. Lisa's family was in the courtroom. Her mother, who had waited a long time to find out the truth about her daughter's death, was finally able to find peace. She expressed gratitude to everyone who helped in the investigation and those who did not stand aside and helped her family. As a result, the killer was sent to spend the rest of his life in prison. One of the longest-running criminal cases in the state has been officially closed. In any case, the hard truth is much preferable to endless ignorance, even after 25 years. Friends, write your opinion in the comments, and also subscribe to the channel and watch my other videos. Thank you all.